Hello and welcome into the Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Roux of Big Ten Network, and this week's guests are Blake Hayes from Illinois football and Harold Shelton, manager of research for Big Ten Network. Let's get into it.
Take a look, listen, and enjoy. Look at here.
With the catch, the finish! Oh, my goodness! What a catch!
Oh,
Energy,
my goodness.
enthusiasm. It's picked off! It's selfish! Brilliant!
He's still going! Touchdown!
All right, before we get to Illinois punter Blake Hayes, quick word from our sponsor, Northwestern University School of Professional Studies. You can build a solid foundation in the strategic, creative, and analytic skills that are essential for success in the business of sports in the master's program in sports administration at Northwestern University. Find out more at sps.northwestern.edu/sports. Thanks as always to our sponsor, putting on a great program at Northwestern, the master's program. Great for somebody who wants to work in sports, work at a place like Big Ten Network. Definitely check that out if that appeals to you. All right, like I mentioned, guest is Blake Hayes, Illinois punter by way of Australia, Melbourne, Australia. Interesting dude, guy who's blew up social media more than a handful of times over the years, not only because he's a great punter, but just a fun guy to follow. He's had some funny fakes over the years, some celebrations that we ask him about, and just talk about his path to the States, path to eventually, hopefully, the NFL as he trains now, as his Illinois career has come to a close, and just get to know overall a very fun guy in general. So great discussion with Blake Hayes of the Illini, and we'll get right to it. It's a Take 10 podcast discussion with Blake Hayes. All right, I'm very pleased to be joined by an all Big Ten punter from Illinois. You've probably seen him on our social media accounts, maybe on Pat McAfee's social media accounts. He's an Australian all-star special teamer. It's Blake Hayes. Blake, how you doing, man?
Good, thank you. Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, I mean, only the finest introductions for fellow Illini like myself, so had to do it extra big for you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, Blake, I'm curious because I don't even really know. Shame on me for not following the news as closely as I should, but are you done at Illinois, correct? Because you had 5 years under your belt there. So are you moving on now to the NFL after this?
Yeah. So, I'm done playing. I was lucky enough to get that COVID year. So I did start my freshman year and then went through, got that COVID year. So that was my fifth and final year. And now just in Champaign training for the pro day and all those things to come for the NFL.
Yeah, I figured that was the case, but with COVID year, like you said, and all the fifth and sixth year seniors we're seeing in college sports right now, I couldn't be too sure. So glad to get that update. And for you, you're relatively young by Aussie punter standards, I feel like. I've talked to guys like Wade Lees before on the pod, and they're a little older. So you're still pretty young. What are you going to do from now until the NFL draft? Are you going to train in Champaign the whole time? Are you going to head somewhere else? What's the next few months look like for you? Yeah,
I'll be training in Champaign with Coach Tank. He's awesome. We've already stuck into a couple sessions. We just actually kick-started it yesterday, kind of the official training. So we got stuck into that. Just had our second day today. And then, just going around, punting, catching up with a few of the other Aussies as well, getting some training in. Just locking in with our snappers here as well, Ethan. So that will be really good to get that operation going, especially for pro day. So, just trying to, improve on my weaknesses and make those strengths even stronger throughout the off season. So put me in the best position for the NFL.
Yeah, it seems like you're part of at least a couple tight-knit special teams communities. Obviously, the Aussie punter community is real close. And then it seems like you guys at Illinois had a tight group, as Big Ten special teams units tend to be. Guys called yourselves the Lads, and you had James McCourt from overseas as well in Ireland. Just take me through kind of the branding of your guys' group and how it evolved as you guys got together. I know Ethan as well has been a funny guy for us, doing some stunts for us over the years.
Yeah, James and Ethan have been here since they actually got here a year before me. So as soon as I rolled in, they welcomed me with open arms. And they've been here like for the whole time and been really supportive. So we've been really close, and our special teams, our KPS room has always been really small. We've only had like 6, maybe 7 guys max, where like other schools will have like 4 kickers, 4 punters, 4 snappers. We've only had like 2 of each really. So naturally you just get really close to each other. And obviously through a football season, a lot of adversity, a lot of, challenges, and you just become stronger through that. So yeah, we got pretty close. And then the lads, that came about through Coach B. He came to me and James and kind of wanted to, I guess, up our marketability because we were both foreign. We were trying to figure out names. We came up with some pretty stupid ones. Like I was a big fan of foreign legislation. So that was just a couple. And we actually spoke about it with, there was an Australian on the team. He graduated in 2018, I believe, Zach Holman. He was a wide receiver and safety. And he was kind of part of like the lads, like the initial kind of movement before we really thought of anything of it. So yeah, Coach B came to us and we kind of presented him with the lads and he loved it. So we just rolled forward with that, and it seemed to like grab on a little bit through the season, which was cool.
Love it. Yeah, you got to have your branding on point in the name, image, and likeness era. So well done there. We'll talk a little bit more about some Illini on-field memories, but I wanted to get into, because I saw you've been posting about it recently, your involvement with Connor's run and your involvement in fighting, looks like pediatric brain cancer, and it looks like you're part of a larger movement. I was looking into it a little bit, but I want you to fill us in on what goes into that, your personal connection to it, and how listeners can get involved, because it looks like an awesome cause.
Yeah, so Connor's Run is a part of the Robert Connor Dawes Foundation, which so there was a student from my high school who was diagnosed with pediatric brain cancer and passed away at the age of 18. And his story became really well known in the community. And his mother, Liz Dawes, founded the Robert Connor Dawes Foundation, which raises money for pediatric brain cancer. It's the #1 disease killer for children. So initially she started the foundation and had an event called Connor's Run, which was, to give some backstory, Connor was on the rowing team at school. And I also was as well. So there was a connection there. His story was told a lot in the rowing community at school. So the Connor's Run, the initial run is from his house to the boat sheds in the city, which is 18 kilometers, probably, I don't know, like 7 miles. I don't really know miles, but it's a long run. And so that's the kind of fun run that they do. They have a shortened version, but yeah, from there to the city is the run that he would do. And that's when they started doing that in September. To raise some funds. And, it got a little traction at the start. In the first few years, it raised a decent amount of money. And then recently, like, they've just been smashing it, like over $1 million, $1.5 million. It's probably over 2 now. So yeah, with that, last year I started talking about it a little bit and sharing it with local media outlets. And, they were really great. They got on board. I had just like a donation page set up, kind of tied in with Illinois football. And then going into my senior year, like my final year, I wanted to do something a bit bigger and really use my platform. So what I pushed was every punt that I put inside 20 was $15. And then my plan was to get kind of send that out and then get people to match it or get people to like up the ante a little bit. So one Illini member came and offered to match $30 for every inside 5, and I would also do $30 for inside the 10. Sorry. So I did that. Ended up getting X amount of inside 20s, which equaled $615 for the year. And then had a bunch of people match that end total. Just recently, I had Coach Billama donate $1,000 of his own money So we were able to raise over $6,000. And yeah, the links are on my social media pages, and I'm sure they're tweeted out through Illinois football. I've kind of I guess closed the donation window just with the end of college football season, but it's always open for donations and anything like that if anyone wants to support the cause.
Yeah, sounds like an amazing cause, and it looks like it is a recurring thing year over year, right? So
Yeah.
people can always stay engaged. That's awesome, and obviously using your platform to make a difference is what I've seen a lot of college athletes doing. With the not only the NIL but with their platforms, and appreciate you doing that and sharing. You also mentioned that you were a rower back overseas. I'm just curious, how did you stumble upon American football? I know it's a regular thing now for Australian punters to come over, but what were your sports you played growing up? How did this become maybe apparent to you? And then how did you realize, I might be able to actually do this for my education and career?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I played a lot of sports. Like with school, we were put into a bunch of sports. But the main ones, the main sport I played was footy, as we call it, or AFL as it's referred to in the pros. Essentially, you pass the ball by foot, very similar shape to American football, and it's played on a big field. So I really grew up kicking the football, just like the punts that you kind of see on the field, especially from Australians. So just like Americans grow up throwing, we grow up kicking. Yeah, I played that sport all the way till I was 18. And when I was around 17, you get drafted out of high school. So it really became that time where you kind of had to decide if you were fully committed to the process of trying to go pro or whether it was something you did recreationally. And I kind of lost a bit of love for the sport. It turned a little bit individual for me and lost the team aspect going through the showcase leagues that they have back home. So initially, kind of as a segue, I wanted to come over to the US just for a semester abroad, try something different. I didn't want to go straight into university back home. And then, I looked into it more. I tried getting an academic scholarship. That was impossible. Had to be a genius for that. And then my school teacher, Mr. Lewis, actually, he just randomly came to me. He knew that I was kind of looking at the US, and he approached me with a company called Pro Kick Australia with Nathan Chapman and John Smith. And he said, you should go give it a look. They place guys in the US, 95% of them on scholarship to, big schools. And at first, it kind of seemed a little weird. They were somewhat small when I joined. I feel like they were just starting to get a groove and start kind of dishing out big schools. And yeah, I kind of went for an assessment. They said they thought that I had the ability, and then I kind of made the decision to step away from footy and start going all in on my punting. So went from there, and then 2 years later, essentially ended up in Illinois. And it's just it's crazy to look back on it and reflect, but it was definitely one of the best decisions I made.
Yeah, I remember my first exposure to footy or AFL. It was during early-ish COVID, maybe summer of 2020, and my friends maybe had, we're looking for something to wager on, and it was the middle of the night here, and we got some stream somehow of AFL, and they were going nuts just watching, trying to learn the rules, but also trying to figure out if it was good for their bank accounts. So it was electric.
Yeah, it's complex. One of my best mates, Andrew McGrath, he was the #1 draft pick in that sport. He plays for Essendon, so I don't really follow it, but I kind of follow him. And yeah, it's pretty cool to see him doing well in that league.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, when we were learning the rules for the first time, it was pretty electric,
Yeah.
If they were going to kick it or, I don't know, something about the officials too, signaling that it was good was, I remember, pretty.
Yeah. They go they do that one.
The point.
Yeah.
That's what it was. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I think they need to adopt that somehow in American ref procedures. So, all right, Blake. So I'm curious also, like expanding on that, you mentioned the placement process and, being somebody who also chose to go to Illinois just for the social aspect pretty much, but you were looking for athletics, obviously. How did you choose Illinois? Was it just like a match, or did you actually have like a list of schools and then you eventually decided?
It was kind of the complete opposite of what they do over here. So with that Pro Kick Australia group that I was talking about, they really just like match you up based on kind of ability, personality, fit. I also like really wanted to come to the US for academics. That was really my main priority. Football honestly was kind of like, I was kind of using football to get my academics. And then I kind of realized that like football is a lot bigger than I knew at the time. But yeah, so I guess to get like a little specific, I didn't really roll out. I didn't really rugby style punt. When I was training, I just did kind of traditional American spiral, as they call it, which is the one like that I really only do in Illinois. And the coach at the time, Coach League, he was running a pro style punt scheme, which really doesn't allow for a rugby style punt. So that fit really well because I didn't train the rugby style. And also like personality and things like that. There's a lot that goes into it, but yeah, I never had a list of schools. It was, I got a call from my Australian coach and he was like, "Oh, we got Illinois' coach on the line. We're going to put you there." And like, you just have trust in them. It sounds a little weird, but yeah, you just have trust in them because you explain what you want. I explained that I wanted a great academic school with, kind of equal football, like on a big stage. I didn't think I'd like play on such a big stage like this, but yeah, they really just fit you in with the right school.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. And, I think you fit into kind of this renaissance of punters being cool, like it helps that you are an excellent punter, like we mentioned your qualifications, your accolades and all that. And that has helped you and other punters, kind of gain that exposure. But really, I think you've come up in kind of the era of Pat McAfee, right? Where the position has been rebranded, so to speak. What do you think about, you kind of stumbling into the sport, by obviously your skill, but you didn't know the scale of it. And then also at the same time, it's been a resurgence of this position with social media really amplifying so many of your accomplishments on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's funny when I first got here, like my first year. So my first game that I played in was like the first ever game that I had actually played in. And it was the first game that I'd ever seen in person. So it was wild. I had no idea what was going on. My first year was really just like getting used to it. It was a little bit of a blur. And I think it was a blessing because like we played at Ohio State and like I knew they were like, obviously, I knew they were a good team, but I wasn't too familiar with the history and how historically great they are. And then I didn't really understand the big time players they had. Like I was punting to a guy that got drafted. I got like a picture of a guy diving over my legs who like was a second pick in the draft. And like, I had no idea who those guys were at the time just because I didn't know. So yeah, I think it was almost like a blessing because I was just kind of going about it like it was a typical game. And then, yeah, like you said, as you go through your career, like the standard increases. The Big Ten it's so competitive, especially this year. It was crazy to see how good everyone is. And you really just, each year you have to improve. Each year everyone gets better and better. And punting wise, especially with the more traction that it gets, like Pat McAfee's done a great job of bringing awareness to the position. And it also brings, I guess, like a new spark to the position, and guys are doing different things. Like you look at, like I'm friends with the Rutgers punter. He's a true rugby style punter, and it's totally different to what I do, but he's like, I'd say he's like perfect at it. Where you look at someone like Jordan Stout at Penn State, he's a traditional spiral guy. Their stats really basically match up at the end of the season, but two different types of punting styles. And it's just great to see, I guess, Americans adopting, I guess, the Australian way of punting, more rugby style, and then Australians trying to get on the American wave of traditional spiraling. So it's great competition, and it really brings out the best in everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I remember one year when we were still going around to like every campus in the preseason, we had a Big Ten challenge almost, where each specialist would kind of challenge the next crew. So that was a good time and kind of shows the tight-knit nature of that position group. One more mention of McAfee. I don't want to give him too much credit, but I saw he has tweeted about you. Has he ever reached out to you, maybe get on the show? Any direct communication?
I was on the show actually in 2020. I had that fake punt against Nebraska where I was running all over the place and looked like a bit of a fool. But yeah, it was after that. And I was able to get on his show, which is funny because at the time, honestly, I didn't really watch his show and I wasn't too aware of it. And then I was on it and I didn't really tell anyone. And then it was like put on social media, and like a few of the guys in the team were going crazy. They're like, "Oh, you're on Pat McAfee's show? Like, that's wild." I was like, "Yeah, like, I don't know." And then like now I'm a huge fan of it. Like I watch it all the time. And it's such a good show. And it's cool that he was able to bring me on to talk about that. Cause, he does, like, we did talk about a little bit of like the punting and what I saw as a player, why I decided to run. And he went through a couple of old punts as well. And it was cool just to like bring on a college guy. It's something that he doesn't have to do, but he did it anyway. And I really like what he's doing.
Yeah, I definitely remember that play. And I do now vaguely remember you going on that show. I definitely remember the social media surge that happened after that play as well. I call it like a controller glitch kind of. You're not giving yourself enough credit. You said you were a fool, but you got a first down on it.
I know,
what went through your head, when you saw kind of the C's part for you and the chance to run? Because it wasn't a design fake, right?
No, it wasn't. So like they came out with a look that kind of told me that they were going to play, we call it a hold up. So they weren't going to rush me. So I had time to punt it. And I like to hold on to it if they don't rush. And so my guys can get down there. And then like no one ended up rushing, because normally they bring someone just to let you kick it, but no one ended up coming. So like I started like running one way, and I was like, oh, that's probably not going to work. And then I, for some reason, like saw the whole side of the field open, and I scrambled that way. And I started running. I'm like, oh, like I'm like actually running for a first down. Like I should probably check where the down marker is. And that's where I did that kind of glitch, because I thought for like a split second that I could take a step back across the line and punt it again. And then like I couldn't. So I looked for the down marker. It said 4th and 8. It was like the electronic one. And I just prayed that I had ran 8 yards and just got out of there.
Yeah, we're going to show a clip alongside this so people can see what we're talking about. They haven't seen. I'm sure everyone remembers, but
yeah,
that was an all-time great Blake Hayes moment. And you've had some, actual punts, obviously, that were iconic as well. I know one hit the pylon, that one took off. But I think your most shared moment on social media this year was the Minnesota game, right? Where you leaned into the celebration part of it, rode the boat with your fake oar, and then snapped the oar over your knee. Was that like pre-planned, or was that kind of an in the moment type thing?
It was pre-planned. It was the night before. Actually, we were lucky enough they let us onto the field. They let the specialists on the field like the night before the game, just kind of like feel out the field, see what the weather's doing. And we were like in the tunnels, and there was a bunch of oars in there. And don't get me wrong, I actually love like the row the boat slogan. I'm a big fan of like culture in sports. So I love what he does. And we thought about it for a game-winning field goal, just because obviously punters don't really have like those moments. And yeah, we just kind of talked about it. And then I don't know. It just happened. I had the punt. I kind of knew the situation, and I'm actually looking at our kicker when I do it because we spoke about it. So it was fun. It was something. I understand that it may be like a little bit disrespectful, which I've kind of recognized that, but it's just all in competitive nature, I guess.
I think it's all fair game. Yeah. And people make fun of the row the boat thing with Minnesota and with the slogan that's going to happen. I think they do donate a lot of the oars, or they send them to cancer patients, things like that. So you're right. It's something that is harmless. And I think it's harmless to make fun of as well. And well done on the celebration there. Blake, just wrapping up here, wanted to get a couple of thoughts on the future for Illinois football, even though you won't be a part of it on the field. You mentioned Coach Bielema and his branding acumen, and obviously he's got an eye for that, and pretty good first year as well. Wondering what your first impressions were of him and how those either changed or strengthened as your year with him went along in the year or so since he's been hired.
Yeah, first impressions, just really like a man that knows what he wants and understands what it takes to win in the Big Ten. I think when you look at the Big Ten, you look at teams like Wisconsin, which he coached, obviously, like Iowa. They're all just like, I guess the word that comes to mind is like gritty. Like they run the ball phenomenally, and they're able to kind of set up their passing game off that. So, it's kind of like day one what he came in with. He wanted to be a Big Ten team that pushed for those Big Ten championships. And obviously it's very hard to flip it overnight. You can't just walk in and say that you want to do it and then do it the next year. But throughout the year, he's just been the same guy. Like what he tells the media, he tells us word for word, which is something that I really admire. And, he's just transparent. He's a guy that you can just walk into his office and just chat about things not related to football, or you can get really deep into the X's and O's. And something that I loved as a punter was he was super involved on special teams, especially on the punt scheme. We would talk a lot about like what I thought of like the punt return scheme that week, or what we could improve. And, he really valued our feedback. And I think a lot of that, like James' success and Ethan's success this year has really come down to him and the coaches that he brought in, special teams wise. I can't really speak on offense and defense, but he's just brought in a great culture. I'd say for me, I had way more fun. Like it was just so much fun. And couldn't imagine like how much more fun it would have been with more wins, but we had some great wins in there, and just some really tight losses, which I think is promising for the future. I think coaching wise, they're in great hands, and I'm really excited to see what they do.
Yeah, love that insight. So I appreciate that. I've rattled off a few of my favorite moments of your career, obviously, with some of these questions, but I'm curious if you have any to add when you reflect on your career now, either games or moments, whether it was your punts or your teammates' accomplishments on the field. What kind of sticks out to you when you reflect?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, punt wise, like it doesn't really get noticed much, but there was a punt I had against Nebraska in 2019. Basically like the game clock was winding down and I gave the set call and everyone rushed and I got it out quickly and it was a good punt. It's something that like kind of gets overlooked, but for me it was a punt that really like solidified the film through the week, and the drills that you do situationally kind of all came out on the field. There's some like classic moments, just bus rides to games, just with some of the guys. You spoke about like other players' achievements. I think of James McCord, obviously hitting the field goal. Chase behind me, he was such a legend here. And then guys like that, work their tail off, that may not ever step on the field, but they do. I mentioned Zach Holman before. He got on some kickoffs. He got out there, wide receiver, one game. And those guys that, they call it whatever, they call it garbage time or whatever, but those guys work really hard for their spot, and they get the opportunity and they make the most of it. And it's so good to see them just like work so hard for it and get their opportunity to go out in the field.
For sure. Well said. And one last question, I guess, about your career. And it's not even about a real game because it was just kind of all speculation. But were you following, or were you guys aware as a team and as an individual about the potential bowl replacement in the Jacksonville Tax Slayer Bowl? Rutgers ended up getting it, but I know Illinois fans really wanted you guys to get that spot. Were you hoping for another game for your career? Were you like on top of it, or how did that whole like thing play out in the group chats and in the rumor mill?
Yeah. I mean, I think Coach B tweeted that like he was by his phone, so he was interested, and like, with that, like the coaches were like, "You guys want to play?" And I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I was all in. I wanted to play like really badly. It would have been so much fun. It would have been very interesting to see how our team would have gone on like a week notice. I think that would have played into the fun aspect. Probably may have been a sloppy game. I don't know how well you can prepare a team when they've been off for 3 weeks and they just put it together in a week. But I definitely know with a staff like ours and Coach B at the helm, it would have been possible and we would have been raring to go. It would have been so much fun, but obviously didn't get the opportunity. But hopefully the team has some bowl games in the future.
Yep. All right. 2 questions remaining. These are both non-football questions, so I want to get your opinion on some U.S. culture here. And you mentioned some of the culture shocks on the field, but I'm curious, as you traveled around the country and the Big Ten, some of these stadiums, some of these other college towns, do you have like a top 2 or 3 culture shock moment, whether that it's something about, the food? I remember we were in Miami a couple of weeks ago and the media got like a police escort to the stadium. I was like, this is way over the top. This is stupid, but it was funny. Anything that just kind of was a culture shock to you, if you have 2 or 3 things you look back on?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, a police escort to a game, like obviously we get them. That was just like, what are we doing? Like, this is a bit over the top. And then obviously going to like sold out stadiums, even like this year we played at Penn State, like 105,000. You just like pinch yourself. Like, it's just crazy to think that people are so invested, but it makes a lot of sense when you go through it and you're an alumni. Also like fast food, it's like ubiquitous over here. It's crazy. But I guess kind of like classic America. And then I guess for me, like I grew up on a beach. So coming to Illinois, like a lot of cornfields and that, it's just a big culture shock, but kind of grown to like it a little bit. It's nice and like quiet out here. Not a whole lot to do. It's not like a bustling city or anything, or it's not like a downtown Chicago, but it's pretty nice out here. I like it.
Yeah, downtown Chicago, where I sit right now, and you hear sirens. I don't know if it came through on the podcast, but I did grow up in Champaign, so I know both sides of what you're talking about. So last question, you mentioned food. You got any top food spots in Champaign that you lean on over the last few years?
Yeah, kind of a classic spot, Biaggi's. It's really the go-to, like whenever. It's just like you can't miss with that. It's always good food. Shout out a little local spot. It's called Golden Wheat on Green Street. It's good noodles there. And then dessert. I mean, you can't go wrong with Custard Cup or Jarlings, however people call it. It's a classic spot. Good ice cream there.
All right, solid choices. I've not heard of number 2, so I'm gonna have to check that out. Biaggi's, always a classic spot with the family. I think we went to like some pre-homecoming part, like group dates there, I guess you could call it, growing up in high school. So you're on point with that. Blake, kept you long enough, but I appreciate all the insight. It was a really fun discussion. Best of luck, obviously, going forward. But what little I know about special teams and watching your punts over the last 4 or 5 years, you'll have a long, successful career in the NFL. So rooting for you. Maybe come to the Bears, replace Pat O'Donnell when he's ready to hang him up.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks again to Blake for joining me. I hope we can be considered mates or lads now, or whatever you want to call it. Definitely a fun guy to talk to, get to know, especially somebody who's watched him closely for the last 4 or 5 years. Best of luck to him, and I'm sure some NFL team could use his services immediately in the 2022 season. All right, getting to Harold Shelton now. I've had him on very regularly over the last several years. He's been a great resource to talk to about all things Big Ten basketball and football. He's the Big Ten manager of research, but also is very skilled at talking about these sports, explaining trends, explaining matchups and concepts. And we talked to him about the end of the Big Ten, or the end of the college football season, what it kind of means for Big Ten football going forward, and also some Big Ten schedule news that came out this week, along with a lot of Big Ten basketball talk to close out the show. We're a quarter way through the Big Ten season right now. Most teams have played 5 or so games, and the conference race is starting to shape up. So a lot to talk about. Got a lot of stars in the league this year. Star power is high. So get into some of the scoring title races, Big Ten Player of the Year races, and just break down the league as a whole. Fun discussion, especially if you're a big-time Big Ten basketball fan like myself. So get right to it. It's Take 10 Podcast discussion with Harold Shelton. All right, very pleased to be rejoined by Harold Shelton, Big Ten Network Manager of Research. As always, H is here to fill us in on all things Big Ten hoops and football as we wrap up the football season. H, what's up, man?
Not much, man. How we doing? Happy New Year. I know it's January 12th, but I think the first time I've been on the pod since 2022 hit. So Happy New Year.
It is. We'll let it slide. I know Larry David had the rule on Curb Your Enthusiasm that January 7th was a cutoff, but like if you haven't seen someone, I'll reciprocate that Happy New Year. And yeah, I mean, I think we've got a little break from the frigid temperatures here in Chicago. I just went on a run today and it's like 40 degrees, which feels like tropical weather right now.
Yeah, definitely glad to see that. These these subarctic temperatures that we've had have been real dicey. It's been hard to get out of my garage and into the alley. It's just been sheets of ice, and it's been a problem to say the least.
I mean, just remember, it wasn't that long ago when all Big Ten teams had to worry about was weather, disrupting their scheduling, and then now we've had our share of COVID cancellations for the second year in a row, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's definitely been unfortunate. You hope that this isn't a sign of things to come. I know we had a bunch like in December. There hadn't really been as many in January, a couple notable ones, but hopefully that's going to be the end of it.
Seems like everyone or a lot of teams kind of got a lot of the worst behind them. It's hard to speculate, but like just seeing all the cancellations that happened. And I also think it was easier to kind of wipe some of those games that were non-conference, right? Like there were not as many stakes tied into a lot of them. So hopefully, yeah, like we got things tightened up here in January, and fingers crossed the worst is behind us. We'll see. Cause as we'll talk about in a moment here, we got a interesting Big Ten race to break down. I know this might be the first year that we've had like a prolonged title race between our two alma maters here. Yeah,
there's Illinois, I think, expected to be there. Obviously, I know Corbello hasn't been around, but Illinois was one of the top 3 favorites for sure to start the season. Michigan State's been a mainstay, but they weren't expected to be there this year. And obviously, it's still very early. We're still only a quarter of the way through conference play, but curious to see if those two separate or if it'll be a few other teams that join them.
Yeah, we'll get into it more, but it's interesting. Like 2 years ago, I think Illinois only finished 1 game behind. I think they've been in second place 2 years in a row. But it didn't really seem like a chase, right? Like Michigan State was competing with Maryland and Wisconsin, but like Illinois kind of almost backdoored into a Big Ten title 2 years ago. So it'll be fun if we can get our this like to be a prolonged kind of bit that we get to do here.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I hadn't looked at the schedule, but I feel like we definitely play each other late in the year too, like that either the last weekend or second to last weekend. So I'm hoping that game has a lot of big stakes involved.
For sure. And we'll talk more Illini, Spartans coming up, but we do have a Illini on this podcast. Blake Hayes, just jumped off with him. Really interesting dude. And I knew he was just kind of like following his career in Illinois football closely. And Australian punters tend to have some personality and stories to boot. So talk to him was a lot of fun. And as we do with you, try and reflect on the guests, their careers, and what you remember about Blake Hayes. And we kind of talked about this, that despite the fact that he's a punter, right, it seems like a very specialized position. Like college punters especially are having a moment right now the last few years, and they really have a chance to market themselves even more so than their NFL counterparts.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I don't think it's outrageous to say that he's the best punter in school history, right? I think we could safely say that based off of everything
Illinois had
the
great
last few years.
kickers, but I can't remember any like punters who were great, or at least that were as noteworthy as Hayes has been.
Yeah, and he's done it multiple years. He pretty much won the Minnesota game this past year himself. Minnesota couldn't get anything going. And then whenever Illinois would, march down the field, they might get stopped, but then they pin them deep and then they can't get out of that hole. And he was great at that his whole career. I like that you mentioned Australian punters. We got quite a few of them in this league and they're all really good. Rutgers has one and Iowa has one. And like you said, they got some flair to them, got some swag to them. So it was definitely fun, to see those personalities come out on the field.
It's one of those things you take for granted, right? Like he's gone and you kind of take for granted that you're going to get almost every time a great punt over the last 4 to 5 years. So we'll see what his replacement can do, but definitely be a big loss, especially like you said, when you flip the field like that. And yeah, going to miss Blake Hayes, but I have a feeling he'll end up on an NFL roster somewhere. So we will see. So like we kind of mentioned, it's this time of the year where we turn our attention almost exclusively to hoops, but we had this week the college football season wrap up, national championship, pretty entertaining national championship despite a sluggish first half. I was kind of salty. I swore that I wasn't really gonna watch or pay attention that closely, but it is it is big time college sports. I'll tune in. So I did watch Alabama and Georgia, and it was one of those bittersweet things. Like I don't, being kind of rivals with the SEC and not taking it too seriously. It's all kind of in good fun. Like it doesn't keep me up at night or anything, but I do think it's better for the sport when it's a more national sport as opposed to regional, like we saw. And the added twist of the knife that it was in Indianapolis where we have all of our big games. But yeah, I mean, great game, obviously great talent on the field, talent that we'll be seeing next couple of years. Any overarching takeaways, especially seeing what, Georgia did to Michigan and what we saw, I think across the board is a pretty good year for Big Ten football, but recognizing that it wasn't a year where the top of the Big Ten was competing with the likes of those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seemed like those two teams were the best two teams. And for most of the season, it played out that way. I think a lot was put into Georgia's loss to Alabama, and I think we overreacted to that a lot, not just us two, but like the media at large, to the point that, people kind of forgot that Georgia had like an all-time great defense. And because on one particular day, the Heisman Trophy winner went crazy, we kind of forgot about all of that. I was really surprised that Michigan's offensive line couldn't hold up. I thought Michigan, that could have been a strength of theirs, or at least they would have held their own against that defense. But it was a no contest. And against Bama, same thing. I mean, Alabama didn't even choose to run the ball. They tried to, throw wide, get the running back involved in screens. And it just kind of shows that defense, and, they blew a lot of teams out all year. Even with the 41 they gave up to Alabama the first game, they still were like a top 5 defense over the last 20 years or so. And it was speed all over the field. And we, the league as a whole had a really good year, but we got work to do to get those kind of athletes and that much depth on the field for our main competitors.
Yeah, I don't think Michigan was as behind as they looked in that game in the semifinal. Like, I think it kind of snowballed a little bit. They were a little shook, and then it just kind of took off from there, and they couldn't get anything going. Obviously, Georgia deserved to win, but you wonder if Auburn could have held that lead and Georgia remains number one most of the year. Maybe if Michigan gets a draw of Notre Dame or Cincinnati in that 2-3 game, what happens? But again, like, the end result is the end result. And like you said, I think there is some work to do to get a consistent depth, right? Where you got NFL dudes up and down first round picks up and down, but having a team in the playoff, 2 Heisman finalists, and just in general, a breakout year with some of our schools, your school in particular, stars across the board. It's a fun season. Hope to be back in a position to compete for the title and get another get another finalist, back in position to win it all. Because since that 2015 final, we haven't got one under our belts.
Yeah, and it's been pretty much Ohio State. I mean, I know both Michigan schools have gotten there, but haven't done much when they've gotten there. At least Ohio State won a title and got to another title game. They seem to at least have the blueprint in terms of how to actually get there and compete, even though they've had some struggles as well. Again, they have a lot of 5-star talent in a lot of different places, but, football, you got to win up front. And we saw against Michigan, they were not good enough up front on either side of the ball. And that's why they didn't get to the playoff this year. And that's why Michigan did. But Michigan didn't have enough defensively up front to deal with Georgia. So, again, great year. I think we see that there's room for improvement for, all of the teams, especially like the Michigans, Ohio States, Michigan States, like top 10 finishes, first time all 3 have finished in the top 10 in the same year. How do you follow that up? We'll see.
This will now be the last football discussion we have. Like, it never stops, as we know. Pro days will start heating up. I think pro days are even bigger deal now that COVID kind of forced pro days to be almost ahead of the combine in terms of like eyeballs last year. I think those will continue to just rise in prominence. Combine will come up in a few weeks. The draft obviously is a big deal. So we'll talk about it. We're not, that's not our specialty, but definitely room to address it. And then today we even had some news with COVID, kind of scrambling schedules, as we know in 2020. Big Ten looked at the schedules and adjusted accordingly and changed some games around. So that was a release on Wednesday. And I just want to know if anything jumps out at you. I know Illinois fans were, I think, relieved not to have to go to Penn State 3 years in a row, despite winning that 9 overtime game last year. And they get a crossover game at Indiana instead, which is interesting because I feel like Illinois and Indiana rarely play. That was one of the games that jumped out to me. Anything significant jump out to you from the shift that we saw in the 2022 football schedule?
Yeah, there was just a lot of moving parts in general. There were teams that, were scheduled to play at home that are now on the road. Like Michigan State was supposed to host Michigan for a second straight year. That's flipped. So now they have to go to Michigan. Indiana is flipped with Michigan and Michigan State. Indiana was supposed to host Michigan State in 22. Now they're going to East Lansing, and it's the inverse for Michigan. We saw it with Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Purdue as well. Those games are all been flip-flopped. So it was interesting seeing that. And like you mentioned, there was a couple of teams who just completely lost a crossover opponent and replaced them with another one. I think it's a pretty good trade-off to lose Penn State and get Indiana. I know Northwestern wound up having a different opponent as well. I think it was they lost. I can't remember. I don't know if it was Northwestern, but I know there was another team that lost an opponent and wound up gaining another one. I was in schedule, for the past few days, so it's all kind of jumbled right now.
Listen, I can barely project week by week schedules, so when you go through it like that, it's already an accomplishment. So do not worry about if you're unable.
That's right. It was Northwestern. They unfortunately they lost Indiana and got Penn State. So gotcha. Yeah, that was the issue.
As we saw, with this year and everyone expecting Indiana to be, like, for example, Cincinnati's marquee opponent, like, things change, right? Like, what seems like a favorable opponent or matchup could be totally different come fall 22. So just one of those things. But it is interesting to keep an eye on and definitely noteworthy whenever there's a arranging of schedules. And I like that. Seems like this is kind of a byproduct of the COVID era. People are way less hesitant to switch scheduling around as opposed to like scheduling something 9 years in advance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're going to see the same thing next year and the year after that, because these schedules, they were set up, I believe it was 2018. And then once COVID hit, they had to threw everything out of whack. And so you had to fix the schedule last year. You had to fix it for 22. They'll have to do it again for 23. And so, we're going to see more of these types of games, but it's cool still seeing that the really good non-conference games are on there. Like those haven't changed. And so like we're still going to get Ohio State, Notre Dame week 1. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the very first game now that we have to look forward to in college football, but Northwestern, Nebraska, and Ireland is the week 0 game. So it'll be one of the first ones, and it'll at least have a
your boys week 0 as well. Get Wyoming at home.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. So
once again, so
Illinois is becoming the week 0 team. Illinois and Nebraska, are owning week 0. So I don't hate it. Get some eyeballs on programs.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather have a bye, later in the year, to be honest. All right. So good football discussion. Thanks for laying that out. Let's switch to hoops now. And we kind of talked about it, right? The Big Ten race is shaping up. We're a quarter of the way through the season, and there are 2 undefeated teams remaining, Michigan State and Illinois. So, just as kind of crystallizes here, I think Michigan is the obvious surprise. They've slipped and stumbled early on, and the COVID issues have not helped them get any solid footing. And then Purdue a little bit as well, right? They've got 2 losses. The Wisconsin win was huge, and I think Wisconsin is one of the pleasant surprises. They look like they'll be in this as long as Johnny Davis keeps up this, heroic effort that he's been putting up as a potential not only Big Ten Player of the Year, but National Player of the Year contender. So yeah, what are you looking at as we kind of take stock of the quarter-way point into the season mid-January here?
Yeah, I thought that, it was going to be Purdue, and then could anyone catch Purdue? And then Purdue slid back a little bit, and then Illinois has been going crazy. But then you look at the Maryland game and you look at the Nebraska game, and even though they won those games, without Kofi at times, they looked very vulnerable against Maryland, and they needed a late run in Lincoln to kind of put that game away. So maybe they aren't as formidable as you would think. So it looks like right now there's a 5-team race. I hope it winds up playing out that way, because that will lead to a lot of fun matchups down the stretch. But it looks like Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin are kind of all jockeying for position right now. Ohio State's already got, the big win over Wisconsin, shut down Johnny Davis, and then Wisconsin already won at Purdue. So that's a huge win. Wisconsin's done a lot of great work on the road, and Johnny Davis looks like the player of the year right now, so I can't count them out. The guy he's probably fighting with the most is Kofi Cockburn, who looks like another, All-American type season for him. So it's interesting that you have a EJ Liddell, a Johnny Davis, a Jaden Ivey, Travion Williams, a Kofi Cockburn leading those 4. And then you have just a bunch of guys on Michigan State leading the way there. I mean, Gabe Brown's probably their best player, but if he's one of the top 10 players in the league right now. So it's kind of interesting that the race is shaping up the way it is with different styles.
Yeah, I remember just like growing up as a college basketball fan, and I would always look at it seemed like it was always other conferences and powerhouses that had players with like eye-popping numbers. Like you look back at JJ Redick and Adam Morrison, like they were averaging 28 a game all year, going back and forth. And, Anthony Davis on Kentucky and Derrick Rose on Memphis. And just, it seemed like those dudes were, outside the league. But like this year, the Big Ten has at least 4 or 5, like first team All-American certified candidates, like right now, especially when you see, guys that you maybe expected to be there, like Drew Timme, guys like that haven't maybe been as dominant as you would have thought to this point in the year. But it's crazy, right? Like a guy like EJ Liddell, I noticed he's averaging 3 blocks a game, like on top of his other stats, which are absurd. Like that to me as a 6'7" dude is ridiculous. But you're right. You got Kofi, Johnny Davis, Liddell. You mentioned the Purdue guys who probably are just outside that conversation right now, but as the season goes along, we'll probably enter back into it with Travion and Ivy. And TJD is another guy who, it figures to be in that first team All Big Ten discussion as the season goes along. And Hunter Dickinson's having a good year, even though Michigan is sliding right now. So yeah, I just feel like we're seeing numbers too that kind of were entered in the stratosphere by Luka Garza, the last few years. Like he was always kind of the forefront and like putting up numbers we hadn't seen scoring wise. Now we got multiple guys averaging 23, 24 a game when, a lot of times you see at the leaderboards it being like a Max Asmus, right? Or some guy that's from Oral Roberts or Davidson or somewhere like that leading. And no, now it's like Big Ten dudes are leading the country in scoring. So I don't know. Have we seen anything like this? Like, I just can't remember as a fan seeing so many guys at the top of the scoring column like we have now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that we got 3 of the top 5 in terms of points per game nationally. Keegan Murray still leads it. He's almost at 25. And I know for a while they were 1, 2, 3 with Murray, Johnny Davis, and Coburn. So Davis and Coburn have slid to 4 and 5, but they're still both at 22 points a game. So it is pretty crazy seeing that, especially for Wisconsin. I mean, I knew Johnny Davis would be pretty good. I definitely didn't see this. And Wisconsin's just not a team where they rely on one guy to get a whole bunch of buckets. It's usually a system thing, or if they do have a dominant player, it's usually a big. We haven't really seen a dominant Wisconsin guard in a long time, and they haven't had a guard average 20 since Michael Finley, and you're going back to mid 90s for that. So it's very interesting to see that. Keegan Murray, like you said, we've seen it with Iowa with Luka. But even going back to Peter Jok, like, they just get scores. Like, they just get guys that get buckets. And, this is another guy that's going to be averaging 20 for them. And it'll be interesting. Like, we always talk about, standings race and player of the year race, but now we got to look at scoring title too, see if we can have a Big Ten player actually win it.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to watch. Just looking at, the immediate week or two here ahead, we've got some huge games in that Big Ten race that'll kind of even shake it up a little more potentially. I mean, you guys got Wisconsin and Illinois back-to-back coming up, which will be huge. Ohio State and Wisconsin play tomorrow, I believe, so Thursday. So it'll be probably done by the time this episode comes out this week. And then Illinois got Purdue on MLK Day. So bunch of big matchups. I don't know if you circled any that you are must-see TV for you, but all these sound pretty juicy.
Yeah, I'm definitely Illinois Purdue, I think, is going to be very interesting just because both like to play through their bigs. And, Kofi's pretty much had his way with everyone. And now he's going to face, Trevion Williams and Zach Edey. So you're just kind of curious to see, how that'll work, how that'll play out. It might be they might cancel each other out, and then whichever guards play better between Ivy and Plummer and, maybe Hunter/Thompson and Frazier, that court might wind up deciding that game. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that because even though Illinois is 25th in the AP, I feel like most people think that, they're top 10 talent and probably a top 2 or 3 favorite to win the league. So, their ranking definitely doesn't match, their talent level. So, or their advanced stats. So I'm really curious to see with Illinois, Purdue, it's a game Purdue, I don't think could afford to lose either. You drop that game against Rutgers. They've looked vulnerable against Penn State. You've already lost to Wisconsin. If you wind up, falling 3 games back, this early, like that could be trouble.
Yeah, for sure. And, Illinois, like you mentioned, being probably better than the 25th ranking. I just think that's kind of them being 25th. It's kind of more playing into trends of how voters have their habits, right? Like they will probably glance at it every week, see who lost, who won, move them in and out. But
people saw the Arizona game. They had 3 losses after that, and they just kind of forgot about them.
Showed a graphic during the game on Big Ten Network on Tuesday night, the Nebraska game, and it was kind of like the net side by side with the AP, and Illinois' net was 10, AP 25, and all the other ones were kind of more or less accurate in the Big Ten as far as where they should be. Some were a little overrated in the AP, but the biggest discrepancy for sure was where Illinois is ranked. And honestly, like just the way trends have gone, the Michigan State, I think, has Illinois fans more uneasy than Purdue, for example, just because like I think Purdue has been a good matchup for Illinois over the last few years. Like Purdue's definitely improved and Illinois has lost more. Purdue's kept their core together tighter from this year to last, but Michigan State has given them way more problems, and Purdue is not really the last couple of years. So same with Wisconsin. Illinois kind of dominated Wisconsin and Purdue. Probably will be a different story this year, but Michigan State, is had their number, and it seems like Illinois had their number when Illinois was down for multiple years at a time. So that's what's intriguing to me in that game. I think it's on the 25th will be a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. And you're right. Like, Michigan State was able to get into the tournament, based off of beating them last year. That was a huge win for them. And I think just kind of the way that they play, they don't double Kofi. They just kind of let him do his thing. And, if you, get 30, but it takes you 25 shots to do it, so be it. We'll try to shut everybody else down. And I think the thing that's interesting with Michigan State is, like, Gabe Brown is turned into a constant, but the rest of those guys, you don't know what you're going to get. So Tyson Walker might hit you with 15. It might be Max Christie. It might be Joey Hauser. It might be Malik Hall. Could be AJ Hogarth. Like, you don't know where the production's coming from. Usually you can key in on a couple guys. All right, and if we take these guys away, then, we'll be fine. But Michigan State, they throw a bunch of guys at you. They're really, really balanced on offenses. So I feel like it's much harder to game plan for them.
All right, so who do you kind of feel best about in this second group before we wrap up, right? You got your Indiana. Can Michigan turn it around? Penn State and Minnesota. Minnesota obviously has the better record. Penn State has had some nice performances lately and pushed some better teams to the brink. Iowa's in there as well. And, I'm going to leave Northwestern, Maryland, and Nebraska in that a lot of work to do tier because they have, especially Maryland 0-4 out of the gate. Northwestern had some flashes, and then Nebraska's just stacking way more L's than I think they thought they'd have at this point of the year. So who in that second group kind of stands out is like, all right, feel good about them getting in the tournament. I think Indiana has got enough for sure, and might even, make a push in the second group. They're kind of sitting at 3-2 right now and have had some nice wins and some head scratchers. So I don't know, anyone stand out among the middle kind of mesh of teams here?
I'd say Iowa, Indiana stick out the most for those two. And ironically enough, they play Thursday. So we'll get to see them. I like them both for their strengths. Indiana really, really guards people. I mean, we saw that against Ohio State. They held them to 51 points, completely took E.J. Liddell out of the game, held Minnesota to 60. The fact that they could honestly be undefeated. They had a double overtime loss to Syracuse. They blew a big lead at Wisconsin, and they had a very winnable game against Penn State that they let get away, and those are their 3 losses. So they certainly could be undefeated. Imagine what the conversation would be if they won 2 of those and they're sitting here at 14-1. They're probably somewhere inside the top 20, and we're talking about them totally differently. I think that Mike Woodson's done a good job, kind of making defense be their identity, and they have a star in TJD. And I like that Mike Woodson's able to basically just call him out, like, look, what you're doing is not good enough, and we need more out of you. But he's like taking to that criticism, and he's not taking it personally. And I feel like that can set them up, for the dog days of February, where we've seen them struggle to get over the hump. I think the fact that, a culture is being set there will set them up to get to the tournament for the first time in a while. And Iowa, conversely, we know they can score on anybody. And Keegan Murray, as we talked about, is the nation's leading scorer. And I don't think they could compete for the league title, but I think they'll win enough games to make the tournament pretty comfortably.
All right, last question. You think Michigan's going to figure this out enough to get in the tournament? Obviously, a top 5 team coming out of the gates and a Big Ten title contender in everyone's minds. Really rough start, but they have a lot of talent. You think it's going to be enough to steady the ship a little bit?
They do have a lot of talent. If they can't reschedule those games, I'm going to say no. They need big wins. They don't have a quad 1 win. I think they have 1 quad 1 and quad 2 win. They're 7-6 right now. If this Illinois game doesn't get played and they can't reschedule that, that's losing Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois 3 major chances to get wins, with 2 of those being at home. If they can't make those up, they have to go on the road and find a way to beat some of these teams. And I think the losses could just pile up at that point. And I don't know if they'd have enough to get over the hump. They really don't have a good point guard right now. And I think that's affecting everything else. Hunter Dickinson hasn't been as efficient. Defensively, they haven't been as good. And, if they're just trying to get over, COVID issues, I don't know if that's enough time to turn it around and, get through this tough league.
Do you know, so if they can't reschedule those games, and I'm still working through the protocols here, I know they announced a change recently. Are those forfeits then, or is that a no contest?
I think it's going to be a no contest. Originally, I believe they were saying it could be a forfeit, but I think they wound up changing it to being a no contest. So it could be a situation again where we have to go off a win percentage. I know, I'm sure you know all about that from a year ago. So I hope it's not that way. Like, I hope it's not where, Illinois plays 19 and Michigan State plays 18 and, Purdue plays 19 and we have to figure out, everyone has the same amount of wins, but the winning percentage is different. I hope we don't run into a situation like that.
Right. All right. Well, a long way to go before we have to worry about any of that. And glad to kind of check in and take the pulse here. Appreciate it, H. We'll hop off for now and, watch some of these big games unfold the rest of the week. Thursday night should be a lot of fun for sure. And like I said, that next week will be fun as well with some unique MLK Day matchups. Haven't really had those before, and some daytime basketball. That'll be cool. And we should be back on next week. So gonna need your expertise. I'm gonna need to lean on you pretty soon again here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Like you said, we'll get a little bit more clarity with a lot of these big matchups happening over the next few days. So should be a lot to talk about when we talk again.
All right. Talk soon. All right. Thanks once again to Harold and Blake for joining the show. Appreciate those guys. Harold, as always, and Blake jumping on for the first time. Interesting discussion with Blake, and always good to chat with Harold and catch up. Hopefully, we'll have a couple more episodes coming at you to keep track of the Big Ten basketball progress, at least to the end of the month here and going forward to the end of the season. We'll have a couple more, hopefully next week and the week following, just to build a constant cadence here of episodes and get back into a rhythm with the new year. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Julie Bronder for stitching the show together. And just a quick reminder that if you were tuning in and have not done so already, you can subscribe to the Take 10 Podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. We are also on YouTube as well. So you can see the guests on video, see me interviewing them on the Big Ten Network YouTube channel. Search Take 10 Podcast. There is a playlist available that is a host for all these episodes. So we're visual and audio strong here on the Take 10 Podcast. All right. Like I said, we'll be coming back at you soon. So until then, take care. And we will talk to you very soon here on Take 10 Podcast.